Hey there, Matt Hodkinson here, and welcome back to the Consultancy Edge. This is our first episode of 2026, and I'm kicking it off with someone who's spent over 20 years inside the agency world: PR, digital, social, advertising, including leadership roles at global networks before making the jump to build his own thing. My guest is James Thomlinson, founder of Sprint Partners, a management consultancy for consultancies, helping founders and leadership teams go from proposition to pipeline to partnerships and ultimately growth that sticks. In this conversation, we go into why marketing feels harder than ever right now. More noise, more channels, tighter budgets, and why AI is accelerating the sea of same if you let it lead the thinking. James shares a really grounded take on where the value has moved: higher end strategic input, original thinking, human trust, and building a business that isn't just founder dependent. We also talk through what he sees as the most common growth blockers: weak differentiation, leaky pipelines, and shaky pitching, plus his growth accelerator lens for what top performers do differently. All right, let's get into it. This is the Consultancy Edge with James Thomlinson of Sprint Partners. Welcome to the Consultancy Edge, James Thomlinson. How are you today, sir?
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm great. Yeah, not too bad. A
Good.
few days until Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I know that this is going out in the new year, but we're recording this at Christmas time. And yeah, I think we're all sort of winding down. But before we wind down, let's talk about how you wound your business up. You spent over 20 years in agencies. You now run marketing strategy for a number of clients in the consultancy space and beyond. Tell us about Sprint Partners and what you do.
Yeah, so Sprint Partners is a management consultancy for consultancies and some in-house teams. So I spent 20 years working in the marketing industry. So I've worked at public relations agencies, digital and social, and also advertising. Latterly, I was at a global advertising network before setting this up. Something I really enjoyed, having spent 15 years in managing director positions, was the business plan inside of it, the business strategy, the growth strategy. And working in the marketing industry now, it's a lot harder work. You have to work incredibly hard for lower margins. So when I approached 40, I thought, right, I've spent 20 years working for myself, probably spend the next 20 years, 20 years working for someone else, probably now want to spend the next 20 years working for myself. So I thought, right, I want to set up that high level strategic consultancy to help other consultancies using my years of experience. So yeah, Sprint Partners is exactly that, helping from propositions through to pipeline, through to partnerships, strategic propositions, working directly with agency founders or the C-suite.
Fantastic. And as you mentioned there that marketing is harder now, and I can certainly relate to that. But for those who might be feeling the pinch of their marketing efforts not doing what they're expecting now, what are the sort of factors that are impinging on that? Why is marketing so harder to make a go of now, and to create the sort of results within the budgets, as you say? I mean, the margins are being squeezed. What are the factors that people need to know about?
Yeah, there are many factors, and that's probably one of the reasons. There's more channels, more audiences, more diverse audiences and subcultures, different messages out there all the time. People's attention spans are getting smaller and smaller. You've got macroeconomic headwinds of squeezed budgets, which is having an impact on marketing. So a lot of people are wanting more for less. So there are just so many things that are going on. So as you'll know through your work around proposition, having that real clear proposition and strategic focus is incredibly important to not only stand out but deliver impact cost effectively. There's also in the consultancy world and in marketing and advertising world, it's also an incredibly saturated market. The cost to entry and barriers to entry are lower than they ever have been. Like you can start up your own consultancy from home using your network and experience. So when it is more competitive, clients have more choice, and that also drives down price as well. And then probably the final thing I would say, which is probably one of the most transformative things that I've ever seen in my career, is the AI, the revolution. That is just highly democratized. People have access to these incredibly powerful tools that before you'd have to be part of a huge company with big budgets to have access to such powerful technology. So if you're at the bottom end of the delivery scale and you're swimming downstream when it comes to delivering, that's just getting swept up by AI. So you really need to focus at the higher end, that original thinking, that strategic input, and having the relationships with people are things that AI cannot replace.
Is it that presence of strategic insight where you think you bring your value, James? Because I'm just thinking, and a lot of consultancies are facing this, whether they're in marketing, traditional management consulting, and it's in its various flavors, that the prospects and the clients out there are perhaps thinking that they can do more with AI, that they can default to AI first when it comes to things like marketing activity, like copywriting, design, even videography and producing podcasts. I've listened to entire podcasts which were IA generated, and you would not know the difference. I mean, that's where we're at, isn't it? So what would you say is to people who are thinking, well, we can go it alone. We are AI augmented, if you like, and we can run an entire marketing effort, without any exterior help.
Yeah, I would say absolutely you can do, and it goes back to the point that we were just talking about why is it harder to get impact out there?
Mm.
Because consumers have way much more choice, so it's harder to stand out. But if you compound that with AI doesn't give that original strategic or creative thought. It can only base its recommendations based on what has happened before. So if you're getting all of these, companies sending out more and more messages, but they're all very similar messages and they've all come from a similar base, every business is going to be swimming in the sea of same. So having that authentic, and original strategic input, strategic output, creative output is more important than ever. Equally, having that personality, that personal touch to your business, that real strong human input is going to be more important than ever. And that's what I try and do. I'm huge advocates of using AI. There's a great phrase, human in the loop. I'm a big believer in taking the time from the outset to do the human research, the direction. You set the AI on course, you sense check, you refine, you get the AI to do version 2, and then the human always has that sign-off process. And if you work like that, you can work incredibly, efficiently and strategically. But you cannot let the AI originate thinking for you. You have to be in control of it, like you would, if you were managing more junior members of the team. You have to give them a clear brief, and you have to feed back and alter it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much that AI can do, and it is creating noise. It's exacerbating that issue, and I think the need for human interaction has never been greater.
Yeah.
I do want to talk more about your journey as well, James. I mean, you mentioned there about obviously working for others for 20 years, wanting to work for yourself now. What did you most want to change about that dynamic, about your life and about your work when you made that leap?
Yeah, I don't know how we ever used to do 5 days a week in the office, to be honest. I have two kids. One is 12 and one is now 2. That's a massive factor as you get older, wanting to be around them more. Also having that flexibility, if you want to go abroad and work, you can still do that, although it's quite hard work balancing the family holiday and working at the same time. So the family side of things was hugely important. The other side, from a personal point of view, was fitness and health. I'm really into triathlon. I try and train as much as I can, like 1-2 hours a day during the season, and having that ability to do that in the morning and the evening is great, having that flexibility. So personal side of things was really important. And when I set up my business, one of my goals to myself, my ambitions for myself, was to try and get my business to as big as possible without leaving my office at home, which is a bit of a moot point because you have to be out there. I'm happy, I love going into London. I love meeting clients, but I think with AI, with technology, with my network, with things like video calls, you can grow a consultancy business to a reasonable level without the aggro of traveling into London or other cities or internationally every day.
Mm. Mm. No, I love that. I think what it brings to mind, James, is that I've had a lot of conversations with consultancy owners. They've got into a place where they can get a bit overwhelmed because they're building something big. They have big ambitions, and then the hopes that they had for the work-life balance, there was the also almost the raison d'etre for their move into consultancy becomes increasingly difficult. How have you found the reality of running a business, of keeping the fitness going, of spending time with the family? Have you managed to find that balance, or are you finding it increasingly difficult as demand and that growth kind of comes your way?
I've done no fitness for about 3 months. So yeah, that's the problem. I'm heading into the Christmas period. I've got my in-laws down, and I'm looking forward to finding some gym time for myself. So it is, you always get out what you put in life. I'm a big believer in that. So I'm trying to put as much in to set myself up for success in a few years' time. It is such hard work. It is famous saying that you would have heard of, you've got to do the work while it's coming in, make the most of that. So you're trying to balance doing the work, which is always, when you're doing consultancy, it's quite high level, gives you a headache. It's strategic thinking, right? You're not in delivery mode running around. So you have to sit down and do the work and focus. But you're then having to think about the next work. You're then having to think about your own brand, your own marketing. You might be traveling or going to speak at an event, which takes out a day of time to do that. You've got to check in with people, maybe people you manage or freelancers or full-time staff that you manage. You've got to do the admin side of things. So it is relentless. It's definitely not a 9 to 5:30 job. I don't think I've worked this hard. It's hard because I've worked hard in agencies, traveled a lot, pitched into the late hours, but I don't think I've worked this hard for a consolidated amount of time ever.
Yeah, it's difficult to ever really switch off, right? I mean, if you're not actually physically doing the work, you're thinking about the work, you're thinking about the next bit of work and the last bit of work. It's a relentless cycle, right?
A new podcast you want to do or a website you want to improve.
Well, I want to talk about that because you're on a website, you're on a podcast right now, I should say.
Yeah.
You mentioned there about going and speaking at events and what have you, and I know that that's part of the mix of what you do as well, getting your expertise out there. And I think that's something worth talking about because we would all advocate for that within consultancies. I think that first off, the face-to-face aspect, the in-person aspect is still growing apace. I don't think it's really recovered to the pre-pandemic sort of levels, even years later.
Mm.
But how have you found it I guess, for work, for your own profile? Has it really helped you to bring new business in? And what are some of the benefits that perhaps you didn't expect from doing that?
Yeah, it has definitely helped with profile and bringing business in. Um, I think it's rare with any form of activity that you're doing when you're running a business, whether it's cold email, posting on LinkedIn, um, you know PR feature or opinion piece you've written or speaking at an event. It's very rare that you get you know a direct exchange as a result of doing that, in terms of converting business immediately. So you do have to build up this holistic brand profile and presence. And I do see a direct correlation with being at events, speaking, then posting on LinkedIn, then sending on emails, creating that surround sound with generating leads. Some of those leads, have 9, 10 month cycle. So I spoke at a number of events in January, February at the beginning of this year, and then have stayed in touch with them via LinkedIn or email, and have now just converted, several opportunities in Q4 this year. So
Mm.
you have to be out there. There's no substitute for in person, in my opinion. It adds that level of credibility and authenticity that you can't get virtually.
Yeah.
And it's probably the biggest trigger to close than doing things, virtually. Having said that, I've converted many opportunities just from, email and video calls.
I think it is that multi-channel approach, right? I mean, it's about being in the game for sure. But I think I speak about that face-to-face aspect, and especially yes, events, but also webinars digitally. That demonstration of expertise that you can portray
Mm,
when you're teaching, whether you frame it as a webinar, whether you call it a masterclass or a workshop, whether it's in person from stage. I think when people see your expertise, being vocalized by you, that's when people really get it. That's when it lands with prospects, and it can actually grow quite a great amount of trust in the shortest amount of time, right?
yeah, that's a good point. It made me thinking when you're saying that perhaps I need to be doing more uh, with with video in that space. You're totally right. When people see you talking, interacting, it definitely brings that element of trust.
James, when founders first come to you, because as we're talking about those different channels and whatever, of course, we would all advocate that you need to have people really recognize themselves in your proposition, and part of that is about you outright saying, are you suffering from these challenges, these frustrations? Is this a good descriptor of the situation that you're in? What do you find founders are coming when they first the saying when they first come to you? What are they usually really struggling with? Even if at first they don't say it outright, or they're perhaps talking at a symptomatic level.
Yeah. I think that the main thing is growth, right? Most people want growth. It's tough to grow in this economic environment that we're in. But growth, as you'll know, is so broad. It can mean so many different things. It can mean revenue growth, which is getting more clients, or it might mean margin growth because they've got clients, but they just can't manage their costs effectively. So it's always useful to scratch underneath that surface, and probably there are 3 or 4 things that commonly are prescribed, I guess, when people are talking about growth. One is that value proposition. Have you got something distinctive? Can you stand out in the market? When you meet people, are you leaving that impression on them? And leaving them with a feeling of what it's going to be like to work with you. So that's definitely something. Building a pipeline and managing that pipeline is another incredibly important thing if you're running a business. And you can build a pipeline in so many different ways, and there are so many effective AI tools now for cold email, LinkedIn following and messaging on LinkedIn. But then a surprising number of businesses don't manage and nurture that pipeline. So many businesses don't have a CRM tool like a Pipedrive or a HubSpot. So a lot of the time I'm helping them create a process that's best for them, putting it in place and then handing it over to them and letting them understand how to do that. And then another common thing I see is kind of closing deals and pitching and writing proposals. Particularly if you're in an industry where you have to go and present. In the marketing industry, you do a lot of pitches to clients where you have to go in and give 30, 40 minutes to talk through your proposal. It's surprising the number of people who are just not good at that, or kill their creativity through 100 words on the PowerPoint slide, and they present maybe behind a laptop and not standing up. So I do a lot of coaching in that area, how to perfect the pitch.
Those. I was going to ask you about some of the, because I know that you've pulled out the patterns from some of those top performing firms and what the difference is between those that are excelling, those that are growing, and those that are perhaps stagnating a little. Is it those the kinds of things? Are those the commonalities that you see amongst the ones that are performing the best? Are they great at pitching? Are they maintaining their pipeline? Do they have that relentless focus, or there are other things that you've pulled out from that?
Yeah, there's a piece of analysis that I do called the growth accelerator analysis. So I believe that there are broadly 10 criteria where I look at a business at the start and then compare them on those 10 criteria to their competitors. And you listed a few there. It always starts with having that unique value proposition or you know some intellectual property. I see a lot of successful businesses having maybe that annual piece of thought leadership that they create. Could be a 2026, trends. It could be something around a piece of external research they've done on their sector. So that's incredibly important to have, and you keep referring back to it and sending it to your prospects, and also using it as something to follow up with people after you've met them. So that's incredibly important. I look at things like innovation and creativity. So have they won awards for their work? Are they offering that strategic advice? So talking to clients about the impact that they can have, giving them guidance rather than just talking about downstream delivery. If you're listing on your website a long list of services that you provide, you can be ticked off as a commodity. So you want to be providing that strategic value. Having an international footprint is also important. Not relying on the UK market. So I look at market expansion. I actually used to live in the Middle East for a couple of years, so I've worked quite a bit with consultancies and businesses looking to go over to the UAE market, and also around the UK as well. So yeah, there's about 10 different things that I normally look at, and there's some of them.
Fantastic. I was going to say, because James, you are an example of a consultancy leader, and of course you're looking for growth going into next year, looking at the kinds of sort of disciplines, new tactics, perhaps new strategies that you're going to take into 2026, in which we now find ourselves as people are listening to this. What are the growth levers that you find yourself coming back to time and time again?
Yeah, I think that high-end strategic value is important, and talking about the impact you can have on the business, but then being able to measure it. We spoke about how do you stand out? How do you deliver more for your money? So having a way of showing a client what your intentions are to deliver results from the outset, and then having a very similarly linked measurement framework to prove that is incredibly important. People want to know what they're potentially getting for their money, and then they want to know what the return on investment is. So having that is incredibly important.
You
Um,
mentioned, sorry, I was just going to dive into that a little, because I think and you mentioned that the economic circumstances are affecting all of this, about those growth levers we're pulling, and mentioned also about the fact that we've got to nurture, because the sales cycles are perhaps longer than people would be hoping for, and attribution isn't what we expected. It's not always easy to tell where the business is going to come from. It's activity and correlation, as you said. But I would say that a lot of our listeners would have noticed this, at least over the past couple of years. Deals getting slowed down, decision making, not being what it was. Why do you feel there's so many deals are getting stuck in yes, but not now, or let's revisit this? And what's driving that ghosting, slower sales cycles that we've been seeing?
Uncertainty is a big factor. I think a lot of briefs are issued on quite a short-termist view.
Mm.
You see, particularly in like the public relations industry, more brand building expertise. You don't see a lot of long-term, reputational management, brand building briefs out there at the moment. If you look at the average tenure of a CEO or CMO, it's getting way shorter, right? Less than 3 years. between 18 months and 3 years. So a lot of people in senior roles are going into businesses and thinking, like, not about the brand in 5 or 10 years' time, but how can I get quick wins? How can I increase sales? How can I deliver this product? So I definitely think that's a factor, that short termism.
How do you think that the leaders that you're advising strategically should be thinking about sales momentum when buyers won't commit to those big decisions?
It's adding that value, demonstrating that value, and maybe even being prepared to do, rather than a long-term project, a short-term, project, an opportunity to test working together. Don't always go for that big sell that pulls on all elements of your business. Just try and get a foot in the door, prove the quality of work that you're doing, build that trust amongst all the uncertainty that's going on, and then grow the relationship from there.
Mm.
You used to have a mentality of, perhaps, no, I'm not going to take on small projects. I'm not going to cut my fees. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm only going to do this work. I think you have to be more flexible nowadays. You have to take an opportunity to work with someone and prove your worth and grow the relationship from there.
I know that as well, and amongst all of this, I'm coming from this as a former agency owner, running marketing campaigns for clients, and I know that a lot of the clients in the consultancy space and beyond used to come to us saying that they've had a bad experience with a marketing agency, with a marketing partner in the past. I know it doesn't always work out, and I know that expectations are a big part of that. But where are firms, do you feel, wasting time, money, or attention in ways that they don't realize right now when it comes to marketing themselves?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm a big believer that brands should have marketing capabilities in-house. But you get that real unique thinking and diverse thinking from working with agencies, because as a brand, you're in a bubble. You're also managing stakeholders and internal politics, so it's very hard to get your head above the parapet and think ahead, which is where agencies come in. So I think, yeah, use your agencies for that strategic vision, that creative energy and innovation, and then work out between you what it makes sense commercially for you to deliver in-house and for the agency to deliver. I don't think it's sensible for agencies to be doing a lot of the delivery.
I do want to explore that further because I know that one of the questions I've faced many times over the years is when do we hire and what and who do we hire? Is it best? I've seen consultancies who have hired in marketing execs and the doers, if you like, those that have the low level capability, but they might be getting their strategic advice internally in the organization as well, not always from a marketing experience sort of background. But I've also seen them hire quite senior, bring in a CMO marketing director and then sort of outsource the doing to agencies or VAs even.
Yeah.
What is there a sort of, is there a biting point? I mean, when should consultancies be hiring internally, do you feel, James? Is do they need to get to a certain number of heads in the business before they should even consider it? What's too small? And is it about hiring those doers and then, as you say, getting that strategic advice from external?
Yeah, it's such a tough question to answer, like a general level like that. It will depend on sector, and also depend on the type of business, and even the personality of the person running the business, right? For their strengths and weaknesses. From my point of view, I've recently hired a marketing executive, and I also have an AI and automation expert that works with me. I took the view that I'm best focusing on the fee earning work, that's strategic advice to clients and doing the planning. But I needed to be doing marketing, growing my brand. It wouldn't make sense for me to spend all of my time doing that, because why it's important, it's such like low value, the delivery of it. It takes me away from earning that money. So for me, I spent probably six to 9 months building up a workflow that worked best for me. I then worked out where to use AI tools as part of that workflow. Not all AI tools, like a HubSpot isn't an AI tool, but putting a CRM in place. And then I hired a marketing executive once I was happy with that and trained them on the workflow. And now, you used to have a lot of consultancies talking about like a people first business. I think you have to kind of move that mindset to be like a tech first business, but powered by people, right? It used to be people first, powered by technology. So I think if you can take the time to instill that process, workflow, and tools, you can then have the equivalent of two or three people working for you, but just with one person managing that. So that's the route I've gone down, and the advice I would give to other kind of smaller consultancy owners: spend the time working out the tech and then getting someone in to hire that tech, manage that tech.
Yeah, love that. You've also helped because we're talking about growth, and typically there's a sort of endpoint or a destination for growth, and a lot of consultancies are thinking about exits and a sale, and perhaps acquisitions as well to fuel their growth. You've helped founders, you've advised founders on that exit strategy, long term options. What does exit readiness actually mean to you, James?
Yeah, there's many different ways to increase the value of the business, right? So there are some businesses where they're just so founder dominated. There's very little value in the business for an acquirer. So you need to be thinking about, okay, how can I increase that multiple by increasing the value and less reliance on me as a founder. So showing that you've got all of those processes in place, the database, the networks, the connections, showing that you've maybe got a proprietary way of thinking, or technology or process that's unique in the market is incredibly important. So, and you've got sales leads that don't just rely on you, they come in from the brand, that the brand has got a good presence. So look at, email subscribers to newsletters, LinkedIn company page followers, as opposed to your own personal page followers. So really, really trying to build up the the breadth of that business is important if you're a small founder operated consultancy.
Yeah, I love that. And again, coming back to your own journey, James, and we're putting this out in the new year, a time when lots of people are thinking about their plans for the year and beyond, and what are they aiming towards? How do you see Sprint Partners kind of panning out over the next 3 to 5 years? What are your ambitions?
Yeah, it's a good question that I haven't totally figured it out myself yet. And you'll know when you're a founder, it's hard not to go from one thing to another. But I think I'm reasonably disciplined. I do a lot of work in the marketing industry, so I think there's still, great growth potential for me in there before I broaden out into other sectors.
Hmm.
But yeah, I can see myself getting to a point where I probably need someone else to do that senior level consultancy work, and building out that network of complementary senior consultants is a route that I will go down. And then beyond marketing, maybe looking at other, B2B service provider industries where, they work on a similar operating model to marketing industries and more time based. I think there's lots of parallels to different sectors, and something where I may look at in future. But yeah, the big thing for me is to, hone the proposition, the distinctiveness in the market,
Hmm.
and do more marketing to get out there and have opportunities to do good work with clients, and then get that repeat business in, and word of mouth referrals. That's the key thing for me next year.
I don't think we ever really have it all mapped out, do we? There's always room for flex, but
You have to as well, because the world around us changes so quickly.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's
yeah.
what I wanted to ask next was, I mean, what are you focused on when it comes to learning and developing yourself and your team, James? Because I know you've got a small team working with you as well. We've talked about AI, the changing landscape of marketing and consultancy and the economy and everything. What are you focused on when it comes to, developing yourself and others?
Yeah, so big thing I spent last week doing was finding relevant industry events to go to next year. So half day sessions or full day sessions where there's two, 300 people plus there. You've got expert speakers from the industries that you're interested in. So you're hearing, what's best practice, hearing what's on the mind of those decision makers,
Yeah.
I think is priceless. But it also gives you that, face-to-face opportunity and networking opportunity of being there. And it also gives you great content. If you're capturing content or thoughts or insights from that industry event and you're sharing it online, it gives you, that higher level content than just your own thoughts. So I've kind of plotted a calendar of events where I'm doing that and speaking at some of those as well. And yeah, that's a key thing for me, I think.
Fantastic.
And then just AI. Um, you know, the advantage of being a smaller business over some of these bigger corporates and networks is you can test, you can fail, you can test and learn. Whereas for some of these businesses, it would take 6 months, 12 months to introduce a new tool. So don't be afraid to try new things and see what works best for your business.
Well, let's just quickly dip into this. I wasn't going to ask, but I've been saying for a while now how the powers with the boutique when it comes to
Mm.
consultancy, whether that's in agency land, whether it's in other flavors of consultancy as well. And it is that agility, it is that ability to test new things, to almost be a laboratory of growth.
Yeah.
What's I mean, do you align with that? Do you feel what is the potential for the boutique over the big four consultancies and the big behemoths in the industry? Where do you think the gains are to be made?
Yeah, I think it's going to go. You can't see this on the podcast, but we'll be able to
Yeah.
see YouTube, right? I think it's going to go like that, crisscross over the top of each other. I do think, yeah, the agencies and boutiques will continue to rise in 2026.
Yeah.
But then it's going to get to a point where there's consolidation in different markets. If we look at my market, the marketing, Omnicom and IPG have just done a massive merger. There's lots of changes at WPP,
Yeah.
way more consolidation. So I think once those networks get it right and they've got the power of scale and technological investment and economies of scale, that's going to be for certain industries quite hard to compete. Winning that big international business. So I think that's when the crisscross might happen and the networks might come back in. But if you look at cycles in the industry, there's always been that cycle, right? Rise of independence, rise of networks. But I definitely think the next 2 to 3 years or so, I think it will definitely be beneficial, being independent, being agile until all of this AI kind of shakes out like it
Yeah.
did social media when it came in.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay, James, we've reached the quick fire rounds that I do on every podcast, which is snog, marry, avoid. Now, you can
Right.
do this from the perspective as business owner, as consultancy owner, or you can do this, in terms of the advice that you would give to clients. But snog, marry, avoid. A snog is a quick win, something you can implement quite quickly, but is going to have good impact in a business. What would you recommend for people?
Cold outreach on email and LinkedIn.
Controversial. Okay, what? Just very quickly, what are the factors that make that really work? Because I know a lot of consultancies have tried it, they've failed with it. What's going to get it working for them?
Good research and highly personalized outreach. But yeah, don't rely on meeting people face to face because there's going to be a huge time and investment. You've got to be proactive digitally.
So it's not the stack them high, sell them low. It's not the low rent, just throw them a lot of mud and see what sticks. You're talking about highly personalized cold outreach sort of mode, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Love that. Okay. A marry is something that you couldn't live without in business, something that's going to be there for the long term. You don't see it going away anytime soon.
I think it's AI agents.
Okay. Any particular jobs you've got your agents doing for you that you think are working particularly well, James?
Yes, like research and analysis to certain models and processes I use. Um, Writing of certain content in a certain tone and style of voice.
Yeah.
Critiquing certain documents. So being a critical eye and looking at certain things. So I think, yeah, my tip would be to have multiple marriages in the in the ear to AI agents. I think that's super smart.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, and an avoid. What would you advocate that our listeners ditch? Get out of their business as quickly as possible. That perhaps think is serving them well, but really isn't.
God. Navel gazing.
Right.
Uh, don't obsess with your website, your brand, your proposition, your internal operations. It would be get out there, meet prospects, trial and fail. Don't try and spend time getting everything perfect. You just need to be getting out there and be relentless and confident about doing so.
Perfection is the enemy of progress, right?
That's a good phrase, Matt. Yep.
Yeah, great stuff. James, thank you so much for joining us today. I think there have been some amazing golden nuggets in there for our listeners. So thank you for joining us on the Consultancy Edge.
Yeah, cheers for having me. Take care.